The winds howled over the jagged cliffs of Scotland's northern coast as the waves crashed violently against the shore. In the fading twilight of a cold autumn day, a figure stood bound at the foot of a lighthouse, the bitter taste of the sea air mixing with the smell of burning tar. Her name was Agnes Sampson, and she was about to face a fate so brutal, so unforgiving, that it would leave a mark on history for centuries to come. This wasn't just any witch trial. This was the last trial of its kind in Scotland, where accusations of witchcraft mingled with the fears of the unknown, where superstition clashed with the power of the crown, and where a woman's life would be reduced to a public spectacle. In this video, we delve into the tragic tale of Agnes Sampson, a woman whose name would forever be intertwined with one of Scotland's darkest and most infamous witch trials. Her story will take you through the halls of power, through the brutal interrogations, and into the heart of a society where the line between life and death was thinner than the wind that howled through the craggy rocks. Before we begin, make sure you hit the like button, subscribe, and ring the bell so you don't miss this chilling tale of betrayal, fear, and tragedy. This story is divided into two parts that trace the rise and fall of Agnes Sampson. The first part takes us into the personal horrors that she faced, detailing the inhumane practices of the witch trials and the unimaginable suffering that came with being accused. It explores the depths of betrayal, the brutal methods used to extract confessions, and the chilling atmosphere of paranoia that swept through Scotland at the time. The second part widens the scope, examining the societal impact of these trials, the myths that arose around them, and the legacy they left on Scottish culture. We will also reflect on the broader questions of power, mortality, and the devastating consequences of superstition gone unchecked. The early 17th century in Scotland was a time of immense fear and suspicion. The winds that swept across the Scottish Highlands seemed to carry whispers of a world on the edge of something far darker than the mere weather. And on one such blustery evening, Agnes Sampson, an elder woman, a healer, a midwife, was dragged from her home by men who saw in her only one thing: danger. Her story began, as many witch trials did, with an accusation. It was whispered first, as such things often are, in the corners of dark taverns and dimly lit kitchens, in the hushed tones of fearful tongues. Agnes had a reputation, one that had evolved over time, from a woman who could heal the sick to one who, in the eyes of the fearful, could bring death. She was known as the Wise Woman, a title that, to some, felt far too close to sorcery for comfort. In her village, it was said she could stop a storm with her prayer, heal a wound with her hands, and make a child cry with just a look. But it was that very power, that unsettling knowledge, that became her curse. It was the whispers of a sick child in a nearby home that set everything in motion. The child, whose fever had risen beyond remedy, died, and with it, any hope of escaping the rumor mill. The mother, desperate to explain her child's death, claimed Agnes had cursed her family. The very same hands that had healed were suddenly believed to have brought misfortune. In an instant, Agnes Sampson, just one of many accused women, was transformed from healer to witch. She was arrested on the night of the full moon, the shadow of the towering lighthouse casting long fingers across the rocks as she was pulled through the streets. Her feet were bare, her body shackled with the rough iron chains of an executioner's tools. The cold bite of the air stung her skin, and she could smell the salt of the sea, bitter in her throat, as she was thrown into the dark cell beneath the Castle of Edinburgh, a prison that smelled of decay, sweat, and death. It was here that Agnes's real nightmare began.
The trial had not yet begun, but the interrogation had. The guards who dragged her down the stone corridors of the prison would not show mercy. They were creatures of fear themselves. Fear that some dark force might truly be at work. Fear of a power they could not comprehend. A power that, if left unchecked, could turn the tide of life and death. And so, as Agnes's hands were bound and the bitter cold crept into her bones, the questioning began. The damp air of the cell clung to Agnes's skin as the torture began. The sound of the rusted chains scraping against stone echoed in the cold darkness, a grim prelude to the horrors that followed. Her captors were not interested in her innocence. They were after confessions, after proof of the devil's mark, after the damning words that would seal her fate. There was no room for mercy here, no space for rational thought. They had come to destroy her, and they would not stop until they had broken her spirit, her will, her very soul. The first blow was psychological. The interrogators were experts in fear. They whispered her name in a low tone, almost too soft to hear, as if the very utterance of it could summon the powers she was accused of wielding. They accused her of consorting with the devil himself, of brewing potions and spells that had caused the death of children and the misfortune of families. They painted a picture of Agnes as a woman who had made a pact with darkness, a woman who had betrayed the natural order of life with her secret knowledge. And then came the physical torment. Her body, already weakened by fear and hunger, was subjected to the tools of the inquisitors. The thumbscrews, a device of iron and bone, dug into her fingers, twisting until her joints cracked, until her nails tore from her skin. The scavenger's daughter, a device of cruel design, was employed to crush her body into submission, forcing her into a hunched position, her ribs grinding against her organs, her muscles screaming in agony. Every breath she took felt like a blade being driven deeper into her chest. It was during these moments of unbearable pain that the interrogators would grow silent, waiting for her to speak, to confess. Their eyes were cold, calculating, and empty of any empathy. Agnes, with tears running down her cheeks, could barely muster a word. She wanted to scream, wanted to fight back, but the pain was all-consuming. The horror of it all, the isolation, the torture, was enough to break the bravest of souls. But Agnes did not break. She remained defiant. Her faith, or perhaps her sheer will to survive, anchored her to reality. Through the haze of pain, she whispered to herself the prayers of her youth, the sacred words she had uttered countless times before. Even in the face of such torment, she clung to the last shred of her humanity, the refusal to give in to the lies they sought to force upon her. Still, the torment did not cease. The guards, sensing her growing weariness, took it upon themselves to further break her. They accused her of the darkest practices, of using witchcraft to summon storms, to curse entire villages. They forced her to watch as others, women like her, were dragged before her and tortured into confessions. Their screams, echoing through the stone halls, were a constant reminder of what lay ahead. And yet, through it all, Agnes remained silent. As the days wore on, the torment of Agnes Sampson became a grim spectacle of suffering. Her strength, both physical and mental, was tested to the absolute limit, but the system of fear and superstition had no mercy. In the eyes of her accusers, silence was proof enough of guilt, and soon the chains that bound her would lead her to an even darker fate. Agnes Sampson was condemned to death, a tragic end for a woman who had been both a healer and a scapegoat in a society overcome by fear. The execution took place at the mercy of the same cruel logic that had led to her arrest, the belief that a woman's knowledge, her power, could only come from a pact with the devil. On a cold, windswept hilltop, Agnes was strangled to death before her body was burned at the stake. It was the end of her story, but not the end of the fear that had given birth to her torment. The legacy of her trial, however, did not fade with the flames. The witch hunts that had plagued Scotland for decades left scars not just on the women who were executed, but on the very fabric of Scottish society. It was a time of paranoia, where reason and mercy were swallowed by superstition. And though Agnes Sampson was the last to be tried as a witch in Scotland, her story remains a haunting reminder of the fragility of truth in the face of fear. In the end, we are left to reflect, what is the cost of a society ruled by fear? How many lives must be shattered before we learn that power, when unchecked, leads to nothing but destruction? Agnes Sampson's death was not just a tragedy for her, but a tragedy for all who suffered under the weight of superstition and power. And though centuries have passed, her story continues to remind us of the fine line between belief and brutality, between justice and persecution. Thank you for watching. If you found this video powerful and moving, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it. We owe it to history and to those who suffered to ensure their stories are never forgotten.